Sorry, folks, we haven't seen each other for a while, so we've been catching up on personal business, but we'll get going.
Oh, don't worry. My next one's on a Tuesday, too, right before a meeting.
How are you?
Yeah.
So we ready to go? Is Penny coming? Okay.
I had her off for the next meeting.
Gotcha. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for July 20th, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that everybody in the room either mute or turn off your cell phones or other electronic devices. And I think I can pass on to mute your microphone when you're speaking. All right, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll lead us tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is quorum check. Rob, you want to go ahead and check?
Thank you. We're now looking at the 3 meetings for the month of August. Any conflicts for August?
Nope, all good.
Well, other than that August 24 meeting?
Yeah, we're looking first meeting in September
Okay, so that's off?
for the comp plan check-in. Yeah.
Okay.
No special.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You got it? Good. All right, public comment. This is the time of the evening where members from the public can address the village council on any items that are not on the agenda. Kristen, have you received any written public comments this week?
President Rentz, no written comments were submitted in advance of the meeting.
Great. All right, would anybody in the audience like to address village council this evening? Come on up, Eli.
For the record, Elisha Gray, 1125 Spruce Street, a 40-plus year resident of Winnetka. Thank you, Council, for your support, both in your heart and in the finances, for helping to improve the Green Bay Trail by putting dollars in your budget for that. As you know, Metra has proposed a slight realignment of the Green Bay Trail at the Hubbard Woods train station. And I think this provides an opportunity kind of to jumpstart remediation of the Green Bay Trail. I happen to be a member of Friends of the Green Bay Trail, an organization which has been working on restoring the trail to native habitat, mostly in Glencoe. It's been working there 10 years, and we've learned a lot in that process, many times by trial and error. For that reason, we have some thoughts about the better way to effect remediation of the Green Bay Trail, and by that I mean the whole property from edge to edge, not just the asphalt, which also will be moved in the proposed Metra realignment. And I have made my comments known to Metra. I have made them known to a few of you, and when I get home this evening, I will copy the rest of you. Because part of the remediation is restoring or putting in native plants, something that the Friends have had a lot of experience in. From what we hear, what we read about that in the remediation plan that Metra proposes, is that it's kind of slapdash, we're going to re-sow it with native plants. that is a recipe for disaster. Disturbed soil will just bring more and more invasive species. I see some heads nodding. We suggest that a very specific plan be instituted that will steward the property to its health. And if Metra can kind of start that, and if you as a village and village council can require that of Metra, I think all of us will be ahead of the game. You can have a chance to see what the trail looks like when it's in its beauty in a couple of weeks. We have our second.
Oops, thanks. Ian.
Penny, you came in, so I don't have enough. I'll give you one.
That's okay. You know, I was,
It's,
I was just there and on the trail and saw the signs, which is great. So.
Kind of like a street fair on the trail. I invite you to come. It's a lot of fun. We promote stuff that's green and sustainable and native and all of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Elijah. Anybody else like to address council this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment and we'll move on to reports. First off is trustees. Penny, any report this evening?
I plan to be at the farmer's market this Saturday, so looking forward to it. And yeah.
Great, thanks. John?
No report?
Bob? Kim? Great. And Rob? Great. Sorry I missed it.
Hey, Chris, can I make one more quick comment?
Sure.
I love that new crossing light on Willow Road at Provident. Oh my gosh, that is spectacular. So thank you very much for making that happen. It's really, I'm so grateful. So thank you very much.
Yeah. There are two more on Hibbard.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Oh, great. It's just,
Yep.
that's huge. Thank you. The safety is awesome.
Well, it makes people think before they,
Cross.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and it definitely calms traffic
Oh
too.
my
I
gosh.
mean,
I used it this afternoon and the traffic stopped immediately, which was a pleasant surprise. Yeah, exactly. That's
Well, you're
like-
Penny, so.
Yeah, it must have been the dogs. They probably.
Okay, village attorney, any report this evening? Village manager
No report this evening.
and village president. I just have one comment I wanted to make, so it maybe gets out into the public ether. If you guys remember back when we were still virtual, a couple of restaurateurs approached council and were expressing some concern about various accommodations that were made to other restaurants during the COVID issue. And I wanted to make it clear first to the public that we have customized assistance for just about every single business in town who was asked for it during COVID. You know, and everyone was a little bit different, and everyone had different needs and different requirements. And, you know, staff worked their tails off trying to figure out ways to help people stay in business and survive that thing. And I think they did a wonderful job of it. So anybody who's misled by thinking that you know, these folks at Toco are getting some sort of a special deal or have been informed wrongly. Secondly, all of the accommodations that we've provided for COVID-related relief will be in effect, particularly sidewalk permits, street permits, and that sort of thing, until the end of the summer dining season. So, and again, if people want to come back and request assistance of other sorts or to use other areas of the village, they'll provide an application which will be reviewed here at council, and then we'll all decide what we want to do with them. But for now, Toco has a license to operate out there till when, the 1st of November, Rob?
Till the weather changes. Yeah.
Until the weather changes. So maybe it never will, you never know. But anyway, so I just wanted to clarify that for people because I must have received a dozen plus emails of people asking for us to be even-handed in this and intervene if there is some issues coming up, so. And that's all I have for this evening. Oh, two other things. Rob and I and Jim Bernal and Mike Waldron from Strand conducted kickoff meetings with both the Winnetka Park District and New Trier District 203 over the last few weeks, basically opening up the communication channels, sharing some preliminary information, talking about cooperative permitting with various governmental agencies. So, you know, we are off in earnest now on the design and the implementation phase of stormwater. More to come on those as we move forward. All right, item number 6 is approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the village council meeting minutes for June 29th, 2021 special meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated June 25th through July 15th, 2021 in the amount of $1,089,357.82. Resolution number R24, 2021 approving a Class A1 liquor license for Little Honeycomb Incorporated. Resolution number R64, 2021 approving a Class A1 liquor license for Spruce Operations LLC and an outdoor seating permit for Properties.
Great, thanks, Rob. All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Lampier?
Yes.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Mancini? Trustee Dearborn? Yes. Trustee Apatow?
That motion carries, thank you. Okay, moving on, item number 8, resolution, that's right? Is anything there? Okay. Resolution number R65, 2021, 800 to 808 to 812 Oak Subdivision. This is a final plat of approval. Tonight, the council will consider a subdivision request to create a third lot of record at the subject property. Here to review the history of this parcel and the Plan Commission proceedings is our Community Development Director, David Schoen. David, take it away.
Good evening. But before I get into the presentation, at the dais at your space, there's a corrected resolution, some language snuck in there that shouldn't have been in it. So that will be the resolution you'll be voting on this evening, is with that language adjusted. So tonight, we're considering a final plat of subdivision with a variation. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Oak Street and Chestnut Street. The westerly vacant part of 800 Oak Street parcel was sold in the mid-90s without having gone through the village's subdivision process. Since that time, village staff has informed the owners and any interested parties who are interested in purchasing it that in order to develop the site as a separate lot, the 800 Oak property would need to be properly subdivided, and we're here this evening to do that. The property, the northerly 3/4 of it is Zone C2, commercial. The commercial district, and then the southerly 1/4 is Zone B1, multifamily residential. These are images of the property. The 800 Oak property, which is in the upper left, consists of first floor commercial and 12 apartments above. In the upper right is 812 Oak, which is a 4-story building with commercial on the first floor and residential condo units, 12 of them above. And then the image in the lower half is that vacant parcel or part that's part of 800 Oak. Both of the existing buildings are served by below-grade parking on each of the sites, and those are accessed off of a private alley that you access off of Chestnut Street. So the proposed subdivision would create 3 lots, and thus that new lot in the middle. That new lot would be 33.5 feet wide, 187 feet long, for a total of approximately 6,300 square feet. As we were working with the owners of 800 Oak and the 808 parcel, we discovered that none of the parcels that make up this subject property had been properly subdivided over time. So to clean up any cloud on any titles, the property owners of all the parcels that make up the subject property were included in the subdivision. The red lines shown in this image show the originally platted lots. So these are what technically the village would identify as lots of record. This image then shows the current ownership of the parcels. So as you can see, they're crossing those various lots of records. And so that's what we're here this evening to do, is clean up so that the ownership corresponds with lots of record. And then this image shows in the blue lines what the final plat looks like. There is that existing private easement, 20-foot wide easement along the south property line that the parcels used for access. That will remain. There is a new access easement that will connect what is we refer to as the 808 Oak parcel. That's that new lot. It would provide it with a connection to that 20-foot wide access easement. In the staff report, we presented information in terms of what the zoning requirements are for the C2 district. So any development of that site would need to comply with those requirements or seek variations if they needed variations from those requirements. So this evening, we're just reviewing the plat of subdivision. There's no proposal for the site at this time. There have been concepts discussed, but nothing submitted for formal consideration. As part of the subdivision code, with the creation of new lots in commercial areas, it calls for public alleys. Generally, that would be, with a new subdivision or to try to complete a public alley. Staff doesn't envision, given the current configuration and development on the block, that would ever continue. So speaking with the village engineer, we don't see a need for this private alley to become a public alley. And so the variation request is so that current private alley could remain. And then the Plan Commission did review the application at its June 23rd meeting. They did receive one email from a resident of the 800 Oak building, which was included in your packet, concerned about the subdivision in terms of mainly the development on the site and how it would impact their light. And then one member did attend the virtual meeting in just inquiring about more information about the private alley. In the end, the commission unanimously recommended approval. And so this evening we have the resolution on your agenda for your consideration.
Okay, thanks, David. Any questions for David on this?
I do, and I apologize. My my eyes are dim. I cannot see, and I unfortunately don't have my computer with me. But looking on page 8, or the agenda packet, page 33, where it has details in terms of the easement back there, was that originally a public alley that was then turned over? I mean, you know, are the easements back there related to the village, or, because I can't read them, I have no idea what they are, or are those related to just those specific buildings as part of
Yeah, there was-
private property?
Excuse me. There was never a public alley dedicated on this block.
Okay.
So it was an easement that was put in place for the development of just those parcels.
Okay, and then the easement, what is in there is just related to those parcels, it's not village stuff?
There are utility easements in there, but in terms of access easement, it's an easement so that individuals can get to the 800 Oak and the new 808 lot.
So then, the 808 lot, that would be, there are currently some parking spaces back there, so the easement, the access to that building would be through those parking spaces to the rear? Is that?
If you're talking about the area to the east of the transformer,
Yeah, right,
yeah, that would be where the access would
okay,
be.
okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, just curious, you said there were some proposed options for what people would want to put in there. Would you mind sharing any of those ideas with us?
One discussion, one idea was to have a very small amount of commercial on the front, and then parking within the building, which is going to be a challenge, and then 2 units above on the second and third floor.
The ownership of 800 and 808 is the same ownership?
No, there are 2 separate entities.
They're two separate entities with completely separate owners?
As far as I know, they're completely separate owners.
Okay. And the 800 building is all rentals. So the gentleman that wrote the letter is in a rental apartment, or is that an owned?
My understanding that is an apartment. Those are apartments, not condominium units.
Okay, those are rentals. Okay. Because I had the same question that Kim kind of raised there, as, you know, conceivably what could go in there. It's a very skinny kind of a lot. And the 812 people, I can't remember what the side of that building looks like for them. Do they have windows that look out onto that?
They do. They have a courtyard. If you want me to put up an
Well-
image.
You can just look out the window.
Yeah.
You can
yeah,
probably just
right.
look out the window.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So the portion of the building that abuts that's on the property line has no windows.
Right.
And then in the middle of the building, there's kind of a courtyard, and it's the back, and that's where windows are at. And there's a resident here if you want to ask them questions.
Has there been any pushback by 812 Oak residents to this idea?
And I can let him speak, but they're part of the subdivision to clear up the issue. They've had to have their condo association sign off on the plat to clear up this issue in terms of the parcels that were created without going through the subdivision process.
Although to clarify, along that wall for 800 Oak, the windows are not flush against the exterior of the westerly part of the wall. There's a cutout. The windows are in the cutout. Right in there. So they're facing each other. Right. So there are air shaft chutes like you would see in a city building, kind of a thing.
Okay.
Right.
So, there's no other limitations, height limitation, it'd be the same as the other 2 buildings that flank it, correct? There would be no other limitations
Correct.
to that building?
Right. It's the current zoning, which on this parcel allows a 4-story building.
Okay.
Now, there's the practicality of them trying to park a 4-story building, even
Right.
park a 3-story building will be a challenge.
That was my concern.
Other questions? All right, we'll open it up to the public. Would anybody from the audience like to speak on this matter?
I'm John Shepard, and I'm president of the 812 Condo Association. And we have no objection to redoing the plat, because that needs to be done. So we have absolutely no objection to that. We do have some concerns when they present plans for putting a building there. But I don't think this is the appropriate place or time to do that. When that happens, then we would make comments further on that.
Right.
So.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, bringing it back up, any comments, concerns, issues?
Yeah, based on Mr. Shepherd's comment, I have one question, maybe back to David. I think it's pretty clear that's going to be zone C2. So as long as someone comes in and develops it according to C2, there may not be any review required by this board, just unless there's any variances they request of.
Correct.
So if they follow the ordinance, it could just occur strict to the C2. So, but I also don't think you can go multiple stories because you'll be putting additional snow load in the adjacent buildings.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think you're probably pretty solidly stuck at the same height of adjacent buildings, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And
And the parking.
I don't think there's any windows, like you said, on the property line,
Correct.
so that when we block it in air or light, and they would have the same problem building new, if they wanted windows on the side, they had to create their own alcoves.
Right.
So just want to make sure that the board knew that it would be possibly a straight zoning and go to permit.
But
Good point, John.
parking will be,
Just got to meet
Yeah,
the
yeah.
requirements.
Yep.
that'll be interesting.
Others, comments, issues, questions? All right, since nobody's in a talking mood tonight, I'll just move right along here. Oh, I'm sorry.
He's going to come back.
The only issue I have is the side of our building is dry-vit, which is like an artificial cement. And so we've had to pay thousands of dollars over the years to repair holes that woodpeckers make in the top floor of our building. So if a new building does go in there, it's going to be a real hassle to be able to repair those holes. And then the other issue with our courtyard is we have like 4 or 5 maple trees that extend into that lot. And those potentially, and they're probably about 20 years old. I think they were planted in 1996 when the building was built. And so those trees could be killed, basically. So, thank you.
But I do believe that both of those properties, 800 and 812, were developed, or the architectural design was with the knowledge that there may well be a building filled in there, so it's,
Well, 800 was built in 68 when
Right.
the gas station was still there.
right.
So they probably weren't thinking much of anything, to be honest with you.
Right, right, but I mean, the design, I mean, when you're building, and it's perfectly possible that there may be a building going up alongside of it, and at any rate, that is what happens when you build in the city center. I just would like to point out that, thank you to staff for figuring all this out, because this was one crazy set of factors that went along. Do we have many other, I mean, I guess we don't know until the plats come up for development in terms of other cases like this? Where, just the owners, I mean, not that it matters, but it's really crazy that, that the subdivisions aren't following the ownership of the lots, so, anyway.
When this was all developed, they bought the property, they had to have the open land there to put that building up.
Right,
Based on zoning
right.
at the time, so I'm not sure that 812, when that was built, whether they would have ever expected that a building.
That's true,
go
because they
next door?
actually bought the property so that they could
zoning
build it.
changed. The
So they
zoning
could
has
build it,
changed.
yeah, yeah,
So,
that's true. Good point.
I kind of agree with John here. I think that, this will, these people are not doing this just to keep that land open. I mean, this is
Right.
being created
Right.
ultimately for development, maybe development that doesn't need variance. So, the woodpeckers, who knows? What might go up there or how it might be.
Yeah.
Go through I doubt it would be a planned development, Chris. I don't think it would be that big.
It isn't
So,
big enough, no.
it would could potentially just go through. So, anyway, I
Yeah.
think that's where this trail ultimately leads.
Well, it's true. I found it very interesting, and I had never realized that the reason why there's that weird parcel is there is it had been added on so that the 800 Oak Street building met the nonconformity, which, so that explains that strange parcel, which I never understood before. So, yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, it's sort of a sidebar, but thank you.
And I think as far as repairing the existing 812 walls on a property line, I don't know the legal rules of it, but when you build a building next to it, you're probably going to cap over both buildings, including the vertical face, so you don't really have any water penetration in there and/or need for repair, hopefully, or from a woodpecker. So again, I think it might be okay on that end of it, looking ahead, so.
So we have the pelleted woodpecker and the vertical woodpecker.
Right, I mean, in a little airspace, between the buildings.
And I'm not making fun of your concern, I'm sorry, just, I never
Hopefully it's
heard
not a
the
pelleted
term
woodpecker.
vertical woodpecker before, so that was kind of an interesting concept. Anybody else? Rob? Kim? All right, we'll see what we can do here. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R65, 2021?
So moved.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Mancini? Trustee Apitoff? Trustee Lampier?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item number 9, old business, 880 Willow Road zoning variations. This is up for policy direction. This appeal of a ZBA denial of a request for variations from roof lot coverage and impermeable surface restrictions was first heard by council on April 8th. The applicants asked for a continuance of the appeal to give time to amend their request. And tonight I understand that David will take it away.
Yes. The applicant's attorney had been under the assumption we were still holding virtual meetings and is unable to make it tonight. The applicants would like their attorney present for your discussion, and so they are requesting that you continue this to a future meeting. When we spoke with the attorney this afternoon, he said he would be available for of your next several meetings, August 3rd, September 9th, or September 21st.
Okay. Which of those dates would the applicants prefer?
They would prefer August 3rd, but they said any date, any of those dates work for them.
What do we got on the 3rd?
I think it's a manageable list. I don't think there was anything that was going to be too time-intensive. I think there was one water and electric purchase order, cable, and some other perfunctory items.
Okay. What do you guys think?
If August 3rd works, that seems okay.
I won't be here.
So you don't care?
Well, I mean,
Would you rather
I'll
be
in
here to?
Michigan. I'll be in Michigan. I mean, you know, this is, whatever works for the council and for the homeowner, so I mean.
Bob, how about you?
Any date's fine, Chris.
Yeah, will you be here for that?
Yes.
Okay. You'll be here. And Andy won't be here then either, will he?
Oh, he'll be back.
Oh, he will? Well, Penny, if you got a dog in this fight, you just let us know beforehand, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I know I definitely have some questions about it, so I'll be happy to, send you a memo or whatever.
They can do it.
August 3rd, September 9th.
The second meeting in August.
It's a study session.
No, the 17th is the second regular meeting. So the 10th is the study session.
Oh, yeah.
Was the,
You should be here, Penny, for that.
He was.
He's not available on the 17th.
Let's just boot it to September then.
You should be here for that.
I'd rather hear what you have to say, Penny.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, I mean, you know what, I'd be happy to submit a memo because I'm sure they want to get going for direction, so I'm happy to submit.
I think we've given them enough, we've given them plenty of time, so I don't think time is an issue at this point. Let's just go for the September 9th.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay, so help me out here again. I need a motion to defer the matter until September 9th. We can do a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion carries. We'll see you September 9th. All right, now for the main course. Item 10A, new business, comprehensive annual final report. The village's 2020 audit has been completed, and the comprehensive annual financial report has been distributed to the council and posted on the village website. Here to review the results is Finance Director Tim Sloth and Accounting Manager Del Duckworth, along with Ron Amon, partner with Lauterbach and Amon. Tim, take it away.
Good evening, thank you. Presented for your review is the village's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2020, otherwise known as the audit. The main focus of an audit is to provide the village's financial stakeholders reasonable assurance that our financial statements are accurate and complete. Ron Amon is here from the auditing firm Lauterbach and Amon, and will break down the report later as part of his presentation. But before turning it over to Ron, I wanted to cover a few items of note regarding the audit. First, the audit was prepared in accordance with the high standards of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Program. The Certificate of Achievement Program recognizes local governments that go above and beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles and prepare the annual financial report in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. As in prior years past, we fully expect to continue winning this prestigious award. Also, as part of the audit process, the auditors provide a management letter which documents any findings related to internal controls. The 2020 audit resulted in no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in our internal controls. Moving forward, I'd like to review some of the major funds identified in the report, and starting with the general fund. First, the general fund is the main operating fund of the village and posted a $1.95 million surplus. Revenue came in at 99% of budget, while total expenditures were closer to 91% of budget. If you recall, last spring, approximately $1.7 million in budget cuts were identified as part of the village's financial response to the COVID-19 economic downturn. And at that time, we were projecting revenues to be short about $1.7 million, or 94% of budget, and identified an equal amount of cuts to offset the expected revenue reductions. So staff adhered to the budget cuts, and expenditures came in at 91% of the budget, while revenues actually performed better than expected, particularly in the second half of the year. So that's why they came in at 99%. So that's why there's a $1.95 million surplus in the general fund. In total, the general fund unassigned fund balance currently stands at $25.85 million, or 98% of operating expenditures. And as you know, the village's fund balance policy requires a minimum of 50% of budgeted operating expenditures. Moving on to the enterprise funds, or the utilities. Total cash balances in the utility funds increased 4.3%, from $27 million to $28.1 million. And cash positions increased in the electric, water, refuse, and sanitary funds, offsetting a small decrease in the stormwater sewer fund. For capital village-wide, total capital spending totaled about $7.4 million, which was about 40% of the budget. And again, as part of that financial response, mentioned earlier to COVID, mentioned previously was the general fund response. Village-wide, we also identified $2.5 million in capital expenditures that were either canceled or postponed to future years. Finally, in regard to the village's pensions, the results of the audit shows that the funding status of the public safety pensions increased in 2020. The police pension currently stands at 76.77% funded, which is up from 68.35% in 2019, and the fire pension fund stands at 74.32% funded, up from 66.6% in 2019. Both funds are up due to positive investment performance in 2020. Markets took a downturn during the beginning of the COVID crisis, but then improved significantly in the second half of the year, driving that investment performance and the funding status of the pension funds up. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, that's the other pension fund that covers most of the non-public safety staff, is currently standing at 99.82% funded, up from 92.86%. And like the public safety pension funds, this was driven largely by the strong performance in the second half of last year. So before I turn it over to Del, to Ron, I just wanted to make a note. The audit is a culmination of 6 months of hard work, finalizing the numbers. Del Duckworth, our accounting manager, did a lot of work with the audit, working with the auditors back and forth. So just wanted to acknowledge that as well. So at this time, I will turn it over to Ron, who's here tonight to present the report in more detail and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Because out of context and belief of doing live meetings, bear with me, because we're all doing this differently and virtuals are considerably different. So the first thing I always need to make sure I do is thank Tim and Del. The interesting part of auditing is our job is always to issue an audit opinion, and that's what the village board, you engage us to do. So even though the context of how we get there is different today than it was 3 years ago, and then the current audit is different than what it was the prior year, our job still remains the same. And so we have to have the trust in staff that we're going to be able to issue a clean opinion, which is the first 2 pages out of the CAFR. I want to point out on page 22 and 23 is a clean opinion, the highest level of opinion you can get. And as Tim and I joke, it's the only opinion that you ever want to receive from your auditor. So it's a testament to staff to be able to get through the last couple years of auditing, because they are very different than what we are used to. So a couple numbers I want to point out just to piggyback on what Tim talked about is in the audit, as I've talked to you guys before, there's 2 different sets of financial statements. One's full accrual accounting, and it tries to consolidate the entire village. One is how you budget and how you operate on a day-to-day and a month-to-month basis, and it's more what you get from staff. But when we do the audit, we convert this stuff and get to a full accrual basis of accounting. So the 2 numbers I want to point out tonight are on page 39 and 40 of the audit. And it takes your governmental activities, which, like Tim said, is your general fund and a couple other governmental funds. And on page 40, the 3rd line up from the bottom, it shows that the net change in fund balance was $4.2 million. So a very positive increase of about 10% in your governmental funds. And then to do the same exercise for your business type activities, once again, that middle column on page 40, 3rd line up from the bottom, shows a $4.4 million increase in fund balance. So both the governmental and the business type positive increases. The other comment that we're stressing in our firm to talk to a lot of governments about is when COVID happened and a lot of budget cuts happened, what we see in your audit in these increases is pretty standard. Some of our clients struggled a little bit more with revenues because of what their bases were. The splits between residential, commercial, what type of activities they have. But a lot of people put in budget cuts. So these increases, both on the governmental and the business type activities, are pretty common in this cycle of auditing. So Tim alluded to our management letter. It is important to note that there's no reportable conditions or material weaknesses, but we did have 2 comments in that management letter that I just want to point out to the board. Both of them are what we just call cleanup items. They're both in the CAFR itself. One of the comments is the Information Technology Fund, which is one of your internal service fund, is slightly outside of your fund balance policy for those funds. So it's outside of the fund balance policy by just over $24,000. And then the second comment is 3 funds in the current cycle were over their budgeted amount on the expenditure side. So I think it's our job to make sure we report that back to the board, even though they're housekeeping cleanup items, but our job is to make sure the board is aware that funds are over budget and then outside the fund balance policy. So from there, I can answer any questions about the CAFR or any part of the audit process.
Great. Okay, guys, any questions? Just have at it.
Ron, there's got to be more than this. I mean, this was like a nothing. where's the beef on the problems? We need the problems. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so minor. But as long as you were going through pages, and I know everyone here has gone through this in great detail, but I would just highlight some of the pages that caught my eye. Page 15, which was the enterprise funds and the budgeting process. I think the budgeting process was unbelievable. I mean, these funds were almost spot on, and, you know, maybe the different items weren't spot on, but it's pretty remarkable. They were all in line. There were no monetary problems really with any of those funds, and they become more and more important given some of the increase in water rates and the refuse change and so on, but pretty impressive on that front. I was going to ask about the pensions on page 16 when we talk about the funding, going from, you know, mid to high 60s to mid 70s. Mm-hmm. Tim mentioned investment returns, but is part of that because we changed our funding formula from the 100% in 2035 to 90% in 2040?
No, that wouldn't be impacted, because that change was actually for the 2020 tax levy, which is being collected in 2021. So this is still...
But this incorporates 2020 investment returns.
In 2020 investment returns. Well, we made that funding policy change with the 2020 tax levy, which was passed in 2021, or I'm sorry, which was passed in 2020, which then is received in 2021.
Yeah, I didn't think that. I thought when we talked about investment returns, isn't that a rolling average and how they get incorporated?
It is.
I mean, it's surprising that it would go, and I'm interested in your opinion, from 66 to 74% just based on a year of 16% investment return.
For the actual comprehensive annual financial report, that GASB statement, that is based on market returns. So in the actuary report, when it comes time to funding, they do a 5-year smoothing, and that's where you're remembering the 5-year smoothing. But when it comes up and rolled up into the comprehensive annual financial report, the auditors, they look at the actual market and what it is as of December 31st, 2020.
Well, that's pretty impressive, because that's with a 6.25 assumed rate of return, or discount rate, versus IMRF 7.25. You know, we've talked about this, and I think the pensions, and I don't know where this is going, Tim, in terms of moving over to the state mandate, and we've talked about it, but to go into it at 75% funded, when probably the state program is going to have a higher discount rate, and it's going to have it's going to have this long 20, 40, 90% funding target or whatever. You know, we could be, if market's holding, we could be well over 80% based on that formula. I know it's just moving numbers around, but Rhonda, could we be that high?
My first comment is, as the auditor, I don't like discussing this because it makes me really uncomfortable.
Good.
And when you talk about the state plan for the police and fire and rolling it over there, the answer is the 6.25 is it's going to be higher at the state level.
Yeah.
And so then your funding level is going to increase. And I will tell you that you are already on the high side of what our client base is, of what % funded you are in police and fire. So yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, I think that's important, because we had a little bit of pushback from one of the commissions in how we funded it last year. And so I think it's important to know that, you know, Winnetka's, we're ahead of the curve, and we would be way ahead of the curve at 7.25 discount rate. Though on that point, and I'm going to stick with the pensions just because it's, you know, topical for the state and where we live. On page 87, and I was a little confused on this, we show long-term, well, the IMRF long-term rates of return assumptions, real rate of return assumptions. But then we have return assumptions, where is it? Tim, help me out here, on the police funds that are far lower than that, return assumptions. Page 67 is where we have them. So if you look at page 67, maybe I'm reading this wrong, Tim. page 67, which is for the police and fire long-term real rates of return assumptions that go into our, you know, what we expect to earn on our investments, I guess, versus IMRF, which is
Yeah.
so much higher. I mean,
So what it shows, I think, where you're looking at is trying to find the net pension liability based at different interest rates.
no, I'm just looking at what the return assumptions are. So our police fund, for instance, assumes the long-term expected real rate of return, so after inflation, for stocks, U.S. stocks, 3.23%, while IMRF assumes 5 3/4, and so on down the line. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
is that another type of thing we're going to see when we move this over? Jeez. Okay.
Just to give you an idea, like when we did calculate what our funded rate would be, just on that one calculation with the 7.25% utilizing IMRF's rate of return.
Yes.
And for the fire department, it's 83.7% funded, and police department would be 86.59%. And that's just the one assumption. And generally speaking, our assumptions are, you know, slightly to significantly more conservative than IMRF's, you know, anywhere there's an assumption.
I mean, we can take some comfort, it's just moving numbers around. We know that, but we can take some comfort on that. And then, two other questions, I'm sorry, on the pensions. Sorry, Chris, I'm belaboring here.
Go for it.
On page 106, and just remind me on this, Tim, and I think you just did, but on the, these are the employer contributions. And so in 2019, just the actuarial determined contribution goes from $1.1 million to $1.4 million. Remind me what drives that number one way or another? You know, you go from 14% to 11%.
You're looking at IMRF?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what the village obligation is and what drives that up or down?
Yes, but I'll see what your answer is first.
So year over year, your actuarially determined contribution, IMRF sets a rate, and that's largely driven by, you know, their actuary study and all the inputs into that. So a big component of that is the investment return. And even though it's smooth, if you have a down year, and if you remember in 2018, was it 2019, I think at the end of one of those years, there was, where they snapped the line at December 31st, there was a downturn right at the end of the year that kind of impacted everybody's contribution. The village's contribution, ours was hit as well, where there was, the actuary determined that there was a larger contribution. There was that kind of that snapshot that kind of impacted. So that was one of the reasons. The other thing was they lowered their investment rate of return. It used to be 7.5%, and then it went down to 7.25%. So kind of led with the more insignificant one, but the more significant one was that it decreased in the investment return.
Okay, so potentially we could have a little relief this coming budget year with that number.
We would, if we have the same assumptions as last year, and we, you know, stay the course with, you know, what our funding level, we would expect to see a little bit of tax levy relief when we prepare the tax levy in the pensions, if we stay at the same funding level.
Last point I would make on the pensions is, and there will be presentations, I think, from the two pension boards at some point to us, at some point.
We don't have one scheduled yet. I know that.
I thought they came.
We have done that in the past, but we don't have one scheduled for this year. If you'd like to do that, we can talk to them about it. I know that we would plan to present tax levy options during the annual budget process.
And maybe it doesn't matter because we're going to be
consolidating,
but.
And I think maybe one question you had earlier, Trustee Dearborn, was when would this start to happen? I believe fire is going to transact at the beginning of 2022.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Fire is a little bit farther along in their process, so they're starting to transition municipalities beginning in October of this year. We're in the wave that goes right after the first of the year.
I didn't know that.
There is no indication from police just yet, and that's when the funds are transacted.
Are they liquidating the funds, or what are they doing?
Sure.
So there's the pension consolidation, the statewide public safety pension consolidation for fire and police was set to happen this year. Fire is a little bit further along in their process, and there will be, you know, the village is set to transition our funds to the statewide fire investment board in the beginning of January of 2022. There is no timeline for police just yet, but I imagine it's going to be first half of next year. I would think that at that point would be a reasonable guess at this point. There's still talks in exactly how they're going to do, things like the actuary report. Even though it is consolidated investment, are we still going to be on the hook for our own actuaries for a couple of years? How is that going to work out? They haven't gotten to that level of detail, but the actual consolidation of the investments for the fire is set for.
Is there any type of adverse effect, or is it all positive? Is there an adverse possibility of how getting in that bigger pool is going to affect us?
In theory, the larger assets can produce greater returns. They might have looser investment restrictions so that they should be able to get greater returns. But that also could be more risky with the investment returns. So the swings might be a little bit greater than what our funds are.
And under the proposal, each member municipality has its own account, meaning we're not subsidizing any other municipality.
That's where I was getting at.
That has been vetted in
A lot.
a lot, yeah.
Right, and
So,
we'll see.
Yeah.
right.
We'll see.
Right.
But anyway, on
But
that,
there's, clear oversight that needs to
I
continue.
understand. We're not going to, we lost that battle.
Yeah.
But the returns last year were sharply different. And I'm not condemning either, the one was 13.5%, one was 16.5%, both pretty good, but pretty different. That discussion probably is not even worth having because we're moving on. Right. But I am kind of interested in how that transition works. I mean, do we just give them our assets? Do we phase down our investment position? What do we do here?
We're right at the start of, we're just getting kind of documentation on how that's going to work. I know there's going to be some type of, vetting process or audit of our funds to make sure, we have X amount of assets and X amount get fully transferred. But it's going to happen in stages, and at some point we're, over the next couple of investment meetings, they're going to determine how best to, break these investments, convert it to cash, and then get that cash over if that's the best way.
Will you know going into the budget year what the, how the actuarial assumption, the discount rate will be established? I mean, will we know that as we're talking about 2022?
I don't think we will know that.
You don't think we'll know that?
No, we'll rely upon our own actuarial reports for the coming year.
Okay. Well, bottom line is, it was a great year. I mean, honestly.
Investment-wise, it was incredible.
It was a solid, very solid report, so.
Thank you.
Well done.
Other questions or comments?
I just, probably not for this meeting, but when we talked about the 1.7 or so of what we are fearful of revenues would be, and that were either canceled or postponed, I just was at some point curious what's canceled, what's postponed, and what's run rate now.
Sure. So the projects that were postponed are being reevaluated, and many of them will be rescheduled into the capital fund.
Okay.
So, and there's also a couple of things that we didn't anticipate last year that we'll have to fund in 2022 that we're in the process of gathering estimates on at this time. So
there's not a lot of run rate benefit going forward. Okay.
No, a lot of these were deferred just so that we could move them out 1-year cycles.
That's still a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Ron, I just want to thank you. It gives me a lot of comfort to see you standing there at the podium year after year after year. I don't understand how you always come back looking exactly the same as you did the year before. Maybe it has to do with going bald early, I don't know, but it makes me feel young to see you there, that's all I can say. And we appreciate the good work and
clearly
treasure the relationship we have with your firm, so thank you so much. Go ahead, Rob.
Also, just thank you, Ron, but I also wanted to recognize Dell Duckworth, who's done the yeoman's work of putting together the audit. So, Dell, thank you, and for Tim, thanks for your stewardship as well.
What's the new position that Dell, I read about in the weekly report? Dell, what's your new position or your appointment? Not here, but some outside group?
Come up.
I'm currently the IGFOA president for Chicago Metro chapter, and I am on the DEI committee.
What, DEI?
It's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Good.
Wow,
Yeah,
For you.
for IGFOA. So
Good for you.
awesome.
Well, I think our residents have a great deal of confidence in the village because, you know,